Let's pull on out here. Tornado warning coming now for this cell right here.
The United States is currently witnessing a break in the natural order as extreme weather patterns surge through regions that have never seen such violence before. From massive tornadoes tearing through quiet towns to unexpected floods that swallow entire streets in minutes, these record-smashing storms are leaving people to wake up under skies that feel completely foreign compared to just hours prior. This sudden shift has many wondering if we are simply seeing a string of strange weather, or if something much more serious is beginning to unfold beneath the surface. While some scientists call this climate instability, those who follow ancient prophecies hear a much older echo in these events. There are warnings from long ago that the heavenly bodies would be disturbed, and that people would be overwhelmed with fear for what is coming upon the world. And many are now asking if we are seeing the first true signs of those predictions. If this feels like a unique and pivotal moment in history, stay with us as we look closer at what is happening, and please like and subscribe to show some love for the channel. Something truly strange began to manifest across various portions of the United States as a phenomenon in the sky caught people completely off guard. Most individuals were initially unaware of the shift during the early hours, but as the sun rose higher, the familiar blue of the horizon began to dissolve into an odd red glow that stretched from edge to edge. It was as if the entire atmosphere had been transformed into a thick, heavy filter that made the sunlight feel muffled and faint. And in some areas, the sky took on a haunting orange hue, while in others, it turned into a rich crimson that resembled leaping flames. On their way to work, drivers began to slow down in confusion, and many eventually pulled over to the side of the road, getting out of their vehicles just to stare upward in disbelief. As this unsettling color deepened, people lifted their phones to capture the sight, while watching the sun itself take on a completely new appearance. Because instead of its usual blinding brilliance, it had become nothing more than a dull red circle hanging motionless behind a haze that felt far too dense for a typical day. The shadows on the ground began to dim, and every building and tree became bathed in a weird reddish light that made the entire environment feel foreign and disconnected from reality. Within minutes, videos began circulating rapidly across social media, showing the crimson sky over cities and small towns. And the commentary quickly connected these visual shifts to the recent turmoil felt across the globe. People began discussing ancient prophecies about the end times, while others linked the sight to the ongoing Iran strikes, or claimed that the demonstrators against no king were correct in their warnings, that this was a definitive indication of what is to come. In certain regions, a thick cloud of haze brought with it the distinct scent of smoke wafting from far-off wildfires, and meteorologists were quick to explain that smoke particles high in the atmosphere have the potential to scatter sunlight and alter its color. They noted that under specific circumstances, the shorter blue light wavelengths are filtered away, leaving the horizon dominated by these deep red tones. And while that explanation made logical sense from a scientific standpoint, the raw emotion of the moment was impossible for many to deny. Seeing the world in its current state of chaos suddenly illuminated by a deep crimson glow in the middle of the day was undeniably unnerving, and left a lasting impression that science alone could not fully soothe. The sky, which humanity has always perceived as a fixed and predictable canopy of existence, suddenly transformed into something unrecognizable and haunting, as thousands of people stood paralyzed beneath an almost apocalyptic horizon that seemed to defy every law of meteorology we have ever known. While many initially tried to rationalize the terrifying red glow as nothing more than wildfire smoke or atmospheric scattering, there was a deep and growing sense of dread that this was something far more profound, as if the natural world was creating a spectacle so extraordinary that it forced everyone to look upward and question the very stability of our planet. Just days after that eerie crimson light finally faded, the weather patterns in the central United States began to shift with a violent urgency that left even seasoned experts at a loss for words. On their advanced radar systems, meteorologists started tracking a massive storm system that was behaving in ways they had never documented before, as it pulled immense amounts of humid tropical heat from the south and collided it with a piercing frozen descent from the north, creating an atmospheric instability that felt physically heavy and dangerously charged. This was not just another seasonal storm, but a towering wall of black and gray clouds that swallowed the horizon in minutes, turning the bright afternoon into a suffocating darkness that felt like the world was holding its breath in anticipation of a catastrophe. Then came that most terrifying of all natural sights, when the sky began to bleed into an unsettling shade of deep emerald green, a color that seasoned storm chasers recognize as nature's final warning that the atmosphere is saturated with a lethal amount of energy and ice. It is a little-known scientific fact that this green phenomenon happens when the clouds are so thick and filled with massive hailstones that they act as a literal prism, filtering out every other color, except for the most intense green wavelengths, which signifies that a storm of historic proportions is about to unleash its fury. In an instant, the wind simply died, and a haunting silence fell over the towns, as if every bird in the sky had vanished into another dimension. And the trees became as still as statues right before the sirens began to wail their jagged mechanical screams across the landscape. The roar that followed was described by survivors not as a wind, but as a colossal freight train or a screaming jet engine moving directly through their living rooms, as massive rotating funnel clouds struck the earth with a surgical and terrifying precision. What made this outbreak truly unprecedented was that it wasn't just one storm, but a synchronized army of dozens of tornadoes forming at the exact same moment across hundreds of miles of territory, turning the radar screens into a chaotic map of destruction that seemed to signal a total breakdown of our climate. As homes were leveled to their foundations and power lines snapped like fragile threads, many observers couldn't help but feel the weight of ancient scriptures echoing through the chaos, specifically the warnings in the book of Luke, which spoke of a time when the sun, moon, and stars would bear signs and nations would be trapped in a state of confusion because of the roaring of the seas and the shaking of the heavens. This leads us to a crucial question that I want you to answer in the comments below. Do you honestly believe that what we are seeing is just a random cycle of nature? Or do you feel in your soul that these are the specific markers of a prophecy that has been waiting for thousands of years to finally unfold before our very eyes? If we project these escalating events toward the year 2027, the future looks like a world where the very concept of a safe zone no longer exists, as these once-in-a-century disasters become monthly occurrences that will force humanity to abandon entire regions and completely rebuild our civilization to survive a sky that has turned hostile. The sheer speed at which things are deteriorating is a clear indication that the boundary between the predictable world we once knew and a new supernatural reality is dissolving rapidly. Even as the midnight sun revealed the total devastation of uprooted forests and pulverized communities, a new and more insidious threat was already gathering strength within the dark heart of the clouds. Because while the spinning winds had taken their toll, an even greater catastrophe of rising water was silently preparing to swallow what was left of the land. This is a moment in history that no one can afford to ignore, so please like, comment, and subscribe to stay with us as we continue to pull back the layers of this emerging mystery. and show you exactly what is coming next in this rapidly changing world. The sky, which humanity has always perceived as a fixed and predictable canopy of existence, suddenly transformed into something unrecognizable and haunting, as thousands of people stood paralyzed beneath an altered and heavy horizon that seemed to defy every law of meteorology we have ever known. While many initially tried to rationalize the terrifying red glow as nothing more than wildfire smoke or atmospheric scattering, there was a deep and growing sense of dread that this was something far more profound. As if the natural world was creating a spectacle so extraordinary that it forced everyone to look upward and question the very stability of our planet. Just days after that eerie crimson light finally faded, the weather patterns across the vast central plains and coastal territories began to shift with a violent urgency that left even seasoned experts at a loss for words. Because on their advanced radar systems, meteorologists started tracking a massive storm system that was behaving in ways they had never documented before, as it pulled immense amounts of humid tropical heat and collided it with a piercing frozen descent from the north, creating an atmospheric instability that felt physically heavy and dangerously charged. This was not just another seasonal storm, but a towering wall of black and gray clouds that swallowed the horizon in minutes, turning the bright afternoon into a suffocating darkness that felt like the world was holding its breath in anticipation of a catastrophe. Then came that most terrifying of all natural sights, when the sky began to bleed into an unsettling shade of deep emerald green, a color that seasoned storm chasers recognize as nature's final warning that the atmosphere is saturated with a lethal amount of energy and ice. It is a little-known scientific fact that this green phenomenon happens because of a process called differential scattering, where the massive amount of water and ice held within the clouds acts as a literal prism, filtering out every other color, except for the most intense green wavelengths, which signifies that a storm of historic proportions is about to unleash its fury and carry enough weight to crush anything in its path. And many areas across these unidentified regions initially believed the worst. The atmospheric violence had passed as the severe tornado systems drifted away, and the roaring funnels that had decimated the landscape finally vanished back into the darkening skies. But the atmosphere was merely masking a secondary danger concealed within its heavy layers. This was not the typical cleansing rain that follows a storm. Instead, the thick clouds became stationary over several locations, acting like a massive stalled machine that repeatedly doused the same communities with staggering volumes of water for hour after hour. And while it seemed manageable at first, as the water began to fill storm drains and neighborhood streets, the sheer intensity of the downpour never wavered. And eventually, the earth and drainage systems were completely overwhelmed as the rain continued to fall in heavy, blinding sheets. What were once quiet suburban roads transformed into raging brown streams, and the banks of local creeks were quickly inundated, sending muddy water surging into low-lying areas with a speed that left families trapped in their homes and drivers climbing onto the roofs of their cars as engines flooded, and vehicles were swept away by currents far more powerful than anyone anticipated. It is a terrifying scientific reality that as little as 6 inches of moving water has enough force to knock off their feet, and just 12 inches can carry away a small car, which explains why these flash floods are often more lethal than the winds that precede them. Helicopter footage later revealed the true scale of the catastrophe, showing entire city junctions and vast stretches of land partially submerged under a dark, debris-filled river that carried the wreckage of the earlier tornadoes through the flooded streets, as emergency personnel worked through the night using bright searchlights to navigate rescue boats through windows and rooftops, while onlookers couldn't help but notice the escalating pattern of chaos, from the eerie red skies to the devastating winds and now the swallowing floods. These moments of total environmental collapse often bring to mind the ancient historical manuscripts and lost chronicles that describe the world's fundamental elements turning against the structures of man, where the rising rivers overtake everything that was once thought to be stable and secure, as if the very foundations of the earth are being tested by the weight of the water. As you watch these images of entire cities being transformed into waterways, do you find yourself wondering if we have finally reached a point where our modern infrastructure is completely powerless against the shifting temperament of the planet? By the time the rain finally stopped, and the floodwaters began their slow retreat. A layer of thick mud and ruined lives was left behind. But as the focus shifted toward the recovery of land-based settlements, a new and even more unsettling report began to emerge from the coastline. As only a few people noticed it initially. But the ocean itself was beginning to behave in a way that defied the regular rhythm of the tides, as the waterline seemed to hesitate and then slowly pull away from the shore. The sea was not crashing against the sand, but was instead retreating with a quiet and eerie consistency, revealing rocks, coral formations, and vast expanses of the seabed that are almost never visible to the human eye, as fish were left flopping in shallow pools and crabs scurried across the newly exposed ground, while shocked tourists walked out onto the damp sand to film the phenomenon, unaware that this sudden withdrawal of the ocean is often the precursor to a massive and violent surge of energy from the deep. Scientists and coastal experts immediately began monitoring deep-sea sensors, because when the ocean pulls back like this, it often signifies a massive underwater disturbance that forces water outward, only to have it return with a destructive power that can reshape entire coastlines in a matter of seconds. And in ancient maritime traditions and ancestral folklore, the sea is often portrayed as a living entity that signals times of global turmoil, and records from centuries ago suggest that when the sun and stars bear signs, the roaring and tossing of the sea will follow as a warning to the nations of the earth. Standing on that exposed ocean floor, those witnesses were struck by a profound sense of unease as they looked toward a horizon that appeared farther away than it should have been, realizing that the sea, which humanity has always perceived as a stable and dependable force, had suddenly become a source of absolute uncertainty. Please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel as we continue to track these unprecedented events and provide the human analysis needed to understand the deeper story behind the headlines, because the world, as we know it, is changing faster than anyone ever imagined. The water eventually started to return to its original location, as the sand and pebbles that had been momentarily exposed were covered by waves creeping back toward the coast in a way that made it feel as if the sea had just taken an odd breath and let it out for a brief while, as the rhythm of the tides returned to their familiar pace. However, another threat was already emerging deep inland, as the beach began to quiet down, because strong winds and intense heat were setting the ideal conditions for a different kind of calamity across wide hills and barren woodlands that would soon transform the area into a sea of flames. After days of heavy resistance against the elements, many inhabitants of a prominent northern settlement assumed the worst of the chaos had finally passed, as the streets were drenched and the sidewalks were littered with fallen branches, while the distant rumble of thunder could still be heard faintly over the surrounding hills. People cautiously went outside their houses to inspect roofs and fences, while neighbors gathered on street corners to discuss the havoc they had just experienced. But then an unforeseen event occurred that started as a slight vibration beneath the earth. It was so mild at first that many weren't even certain they had felt it, until the glass in houses started to shake, and wind chimes began to sway on the porches as the movement intensified in a matter of seconds. Several blocks worth of buildings started to tremble, and small items slid over kitchen countertops, while store shelves shook, and people realized the earth itself was shifting beneath their feet in a terrifying display of planetary power. Parents hurried outside, grabbing their kids, as store owners came out onto walkways in bewilderment, because a sudden tremor had struck the region, and even though the shaking was brief, it left a profoundly unpleasant effect, with tiny fractures developing in the pavement and dust floating off the walls of older structures that had stood for decades. It is a little-known scientific fact called Co-Seismic luminous phenomena, where the grinding of quartz-rich rocks deep in the earth can actually generate massive electrical charges that leak into the atmosphere, creating brief flashes of light during a quake, which many mistake for something supernatural. This unexpected tremor was the last straw for those who had already experienced days of rains and floods, and many just stood in the streets gazing at the ground, because even in territories known for geological activity, There is an odd emotional weight to the instant when the Earth moves following days of severe weather. The shaking ground reminded some locals of ancient chronicles and ancestral texts, which suggest that there are times when nature reacts with overwhelming force, and the Earth starts to tremble beneath people's feet as a response to the turmoil in the heavens and the internal rot of the world. As the trembling subsided, people silently exchanged glances and gazed at the ominous clouds that continued to loom over the hills, feeling as though nature had momentarily reminded everyone of how strong and erratic the world's powers can be when we least expect them. Not long after the tremor was originally detected near the heart of a major metropolitan district, another detail began garnering notice because witnesses saw a faint vertical glow temporarily flash in the background of recordings taken close to the city's historic brick structures. This light was faint, rising behind the rooftops like a narrow column, and while most thought it was just a reflection or a photographic artifact from the moisture in the air, a portion of an older building's deteriorating brick exterior abruptly shifted and crumbled just moments after the tremor passed. Dust exploded into the air as the bricks dropped and fragments scattered across the walkway as people took a startled step back, because many of the city's older structures were built long before contemporary safety regulations were implemented. Over time, years of weather and structural stress can steadily damage foundations, and that delicate balance might be upset by even a small tremor. Yet the subtle glow in the recordings aroused intense interest as viewers slowed down the video frame by frame to decipher the column of light. When analyzing such events, modern observers often look for natural explanations like electrical disruptions, but the event still seemed strange to those who watched the footage, as it brought to mind venerable scripts and old-world warnings that depict moments when the elements of nature seem to come together in striking ways to signal a deeper transformation of the human experience. Long before contemporary understanding, those verses were penned to capture the force of nature. And at the same time, many community voices urged people to avoid snap judgments and instead try to comprehend what actually transpired, because imagination can easily take precedence over reality during times of chaos. But it was an unforgettable event for those standing in the streets that night as the sky darkened and the earth shook just as a section of the ancient skyline collapsed under its own weight. In the face of such looming storms, there is a historical perspective to consider regarding the internal strength needed to survive when a society feels like it is on the verge of disintegration, and ancient records speak of a great teacher who faced a terrible impending storm with total clarity. He could see that strong forces would encircle the great cities, and that society was at a point where the foundations were being thrown down. Yet he cautioned his people to get their hearts ready for the storm, because the external chaos was often a reflection of the internal condition of the world where greed and corruption had taken root. There is a profound question to ask ourselves when we see the earth and sky reacting this way. Do you believe that the chaos we see outside is a call for us to find a deeper peace and strength within ourselves? Or is it simply a warning of a world that has lost its balance and is headed for a total reset? Historical records suggest that even when the adversary uses subtle evils to fool people, the key to survival is to remain unmoved and to keep a sense of hope even when the flesh is weary, because those who foresaw the turmoil always kept their focus on a higher presence and a greater truth. This mindset of rejoicing even when the tongue is glad and the heart is heavy is the ultimate key to standing firm when the earth itself refuses to stay still. And as we look toward the horizon, we must decide if we will be moved by the shaking ground, or if we will find the hope that allows us to rest even in the midst of the most violent storm. As the night slowly surrendered to a pale dawn, the survivors in the metropolitan district stood among the dust and debris, realizing that the landscape of their lives had been permanently altered by forces they could barely comprehend. The fallen bricks of the historic district were more than just rubble. They were symbols of a past that was being systematically dismantled by an increasingly hostile environment. And as people began the long process of cleaning the streets, there was a silent consensus that the world they woke up to was not the same one they had known just a few days prior. The air remained thick with the scent of ozone and wet earth, a lingering reminder of the atmospheric electricity that had danced across the sky during the tremor. And many continued to study their phone screens, looking for that mysterious column of light, wondering if it was a final warning or a beacon of something yet to arrive. In this new era of unpredictability, the stories we tell ourselves must change because the old certainties of the ground beneath our feet and the sky above our heads have been replaced by a reality where everything is in constant motion. Whether we look to the scientific explanations of tectonic stress and atmospheric pressure, or to the ancestral warnings of a world in transition, the message remains the same: that we are living through a unique and pivotal moment that demands our full attention and a transformation of our collective spirit. The storms may have paused and the earth may have stilled for now, but the energy that was unleashed during those chaotic hours continues to ripple through the hearts of everyone who witnessed it, serving as a permanent reminder of our fragility and our potential for resilience. This is the story of our time, a narrative written in the elements themselves. And as we move forward into the unknown, we must carry the lessons of the storm with us, choosing to stand together even when the very foundations of our civilization are being tested by the roar of the sea and the shaking of the ground. The higher source was continually in front of the great teacher's face, as he was always looking for hidden locations to spend time alone with that presence. And only after experiencing it did he emerge to serve, convinced that a protective power was constantly at his side, giving him a strength that nothing on earth could move or shake. In the original languages, the word for being moved refers to being agitated or rattled, and he was demonstrating that none of the coming evils could cast him down or shake his confidence, because the source was in complete control, which is why we must be ready for the impending storm so that nothing will break our spirits. Spending time in that presence is the only way to do it, and until we are completely convinced that it is at our right hand, we must remain dedicated to that inner connection. Because the message is clear that we should not be moved or agitated by anything we see, and we can maintain our happiness by keeping our gaze fixed on that higher truth. Historical records claim that this perspective makes a person full of joy even in the face of disaster, as if the leaders of the past are telling us they have experienced all we will encounter in these final days. And while they felt the same dread when they saw the approaching storm, their worries vanished the moment they encountered that higher presence. Interestingly, it is a scientific fact that during extreme stress, the human brain can enter a state of hyperfocus that slows down the perception of time, allowing for survival in situations where others might freeze. They were shown how it all turned out and found all the happiness and hope they would ever require, which is where our own hope must rest as well. This leads me to ask you, do you think this kind of internal peace is something everyone can achieve, or is it only for those who are truly tested? Looking ahead, the future of our survival will depend on this mental resilience, as our environment continues to change in ways we cannot control. So I appreciate you watching, and remember to subscribe and stay tuned for our upcoming video. And tell us what you think by leaving a comment below. People are crying, testifying, and making deep emotional connections as they claim to have witnessed events that have permanently altered their perception of this current period of global turmoil across numerous states. And when you begin to truly understand the ancient links and the profound significance of this moment for our modern age, you will recognize that a major transition is unfolding, and that a great return to fundamental truths is imminent across the horizon of our shared existence. We will explore this scenario in extreme depth, so stay tuned until the very conclusion of the video, because I will demonstrate the historical passages and ancestral records that are being fulfilled before our eyes. And I will tell you exactly what you need to do now to prepare for what is about to happen next in this rapidly shifting world that seems to be losing its grip on the stability we once took for granted. Please let us know if you are ready to face these truths by engaging with the like and subscribe buttons as we dive into these events that defy conventional explanation. Because nothing indicated that the majority of a prominent administrative capital was asleep in the middle of the night before one of the most bizarre and terrifying storms ever documented engulfed the entire city in a matter of minutes, turning a quiet evening into a scene of absolute atmospheric chaos. It started abruptly with a low and guttural rumble sweeping across the sky that at first seemed like a typical seasonal storm, but the sound quickly escalated into a terrifying roar that reverberated from every direction, bouncing between the massive stone buildings and sweeping across the national landmarks, with a force that felt like the atmosphere itself was tearing apart under the weight of an invisible pressure. Then the hail began to fall not as tiny pellets, but as large, jagged, and hard shards of ice that struck the pavement, monuments, and vehicles with a deafening and rhythmic intensity that many witnesses reported feeling as a physical vibration through the very ground they stood upon, as if the earth itself were trembling in fear of the sky. One witness standing near a large reflecting pool claimed he froze in place as the sky seemed to crack open with the sheer intensity of the thunder. And a few seconds later, a powerful bolt of lightning struck near a towering stone obelisk, and witnesses described it as much larger and more radiant than any typical strike, because the flash did not vanish instantaneously, but instead radiated outward like a glowing web of blazing veins across the clouds, spreading like a map of light over the entire metropolitan district. A security guard nearby clarified that the entire capital glowed as the lightning spread, and the falling ice appeared to be illuminated from within as it landed on the cold stone surfaces, creating an eerie and haunting glow that stayed etched in the minds of everyone who saw it. While some experts suggest this phenomenon was caused by a strong electrical discharge, where lightning disperses through ice crystals in a process of atmospheric scattering, scientists are still investigating the extreme brightness and the peculiar timing of such a swift and violent atmospheric development that seemed to appear out of nowhere. It is a scientific reality that during such intense electrical storms, the air can become so heavily ionized that it creates a glowing corona effect around pointed structures known as St. Elmo's fire, which might explain the lingering and haunting radiance witnesses reported seeing around the monuments, as the static electricity reached a breaking point. According to ancient venerable scripts and lost chronicles, these storms are periods when the heavens appear to burst through the sky, and the voice of a higher power thunders over the rivers to erupt in fire as a warning to those below that the old cycles are ending, and a new era is being born through fire and ice. Such sections have been interpreted for centuries as poetic and powerful depictions of the immense force of nature that serves as a constant reminder of how insignificant human structures really are in relation to the vastness of the sky and the power of the natural world when it decides to reclaim its dominance. As the city was still reeling from this scene, the sky displayed even stranger indications, as reports surfaced of bursts of pink and blue light, emerging high above the clouds that traveled slowly like electric currents, rippling over the dark atmosphere in a silent dance that left observers speechless. Within hours, dash cameras and security systems across several states captured the same odd hues moving silently across the horizon. And the focus then turned to the moon, which rose as a deep crimson blood moon, appearing darker and more ominous against a sky still filled with faint remnants of those earlier flashes of light that had set the heavens on fire. This mix was unnerving to many, especially when just after midnight the ground began to move with a tremor powerful enough to force people into the streets as power lines wavered and car alarms echoed through the dark hours of the night, creating a symphony of mechanical distress against the backdrop of a silent and red sky. Geologists clarified that the subsequent aftershocks were typical of tectonic plates shifting abruptly beneath the crust. But for those who had seen the red moon and the strange lights, the sequence of events was hard to ignore, as it felt like the sky was signaling the movement of the Earth in a synchronized warning that something much larger was happening beneath our feet. As the ground continued to ripple, another unexpected sign was silently appearing far away near a massive volcanic system in the Western Territories, where geysers that typically erupt on regular schedules began acting strangely with unexpected blasts of steam and extraordinary ground warmth that defied all recorded patterns and left park rangers in a state of high alert. Because this area is situated above one of the planet's greatest volcanic calderas, scientists keep a close watch on these hydrothermal systems. Yet the sudden shift in patterns naturally draws deep concern from those who understand the power hidden beneath the surface, and how a single shift in pressure could change the world forever. At the same time, hundreds of miles away along a major inland river system, thousands of fish were found surfacing in unusually large numbers, which environmental regulators suggest could be due to oxygen levels or temperature shifts. But the timing alongside the geothermal activity has attracted intense scrutiny from researchers worldwide who are trying to connect the dots between the land, the water, and the sky. When we see the Earth and sky reacting with such synchronized and terrifying intensity, do you believe these are merely isolated natural events? Or is the planet itself trying to communicate a warning about a coming transition that we are not yet prepared to face in our current state of complacency? Looking forward, it is clear that our understanding of environmental stability is being challenged. And the historical records of ancient chronicles remind us that when the mountains quake and the sea reacts, the world is entering a phase of total renewal that will change the course of history and redefine what it means to be human in an age of giants. As we move into an era where these once-in-a-century events are becoming a weekly occurrence, we have to ask ourselves if our current way of life is sustainable, or if we are being forced into a new way of existing with the natural world that requires a total transformation of our spirit and our perspective on reality. This is not just a series of storms or a temporary shift in the weather, but a fundamental realignment of the Earth's energy that is calling out to every soul to pay attention and prepare for the days ahead when the old foundations will no longer be enough to hold us up. I appreciate you watching this deep analysis and staying tuned for the truth, so remember to subscribe and stay with us as we continue to track these unprecedented signs across the globe. And be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments below, because your perspective and your voice are vital as we navigate this unknown and challenging future together with hope and clarity. Geologists observe that changes in subterranean water systems frequently cause geysers to alter their behavior, and without indicating a significant volcanic event, pressure may increase, while channels may open or close and eruptions may momentarily become more powerful or unpredictable as the Earth adjusts its internal flow. Fish die-offs can also happen naturally when oxygen levels abruptly drop, or when water temperatures change quickly, according to environmental scientists. Yet there is often no common thread between the two incidents other than they involve water and deep-seated Earth systems reacting to changes that are not usually immediately apparent to the naked eye. Additionally, many are frequently reminded of ancient venerable scripts by situations such as these, where a passage in the Chronicles of a Great Teacher describes a period in the future when people would see strange disruptions in the natural world as well as in the sky. The sea and the waters will be roaring, and there will be signs of earthly misery among countries, as interpreters have been debating the meaning of those phrases for centuries, with some seeing them as lyrical depictions of natural forces, while others think they depict times when the planet itself seems agitated, and there are moments when the sky, the ocean, and the Earth all appear to change simultaneously. The biological balance of major rivers and the processes beneath massive volcanic calderas are still being studied by scientists. However, when rivers suddenly show indications of distress and geothermal vents suddenly rise, the events naturally draw notice because they serve as a reminder that massive forces are constantly at work beneath the seemingly peaceful surface of the world we live in. Do you feel the world shifting? Because the scenes that followed those strange geological upheavals could make anyone shudder, as the arrival of morning felt oddly different in a number of prominent metropolitan areas. Suddenly, a heavy layer of fog blanketed the streets that had been clear the previous evening, and a gray mist crept slowly between buildings and trees, seemingly engulfing entire blocks, neighborhoods, and roads as visibility decreased in a matter of minutes, and images of entire neighborhoods gradually disappearing inside the dense haze rapidly surfaced online, while people reported that the air felt heavier than usual, as if the environment itself had subtly changed overnight. According to scientists, fog can develop when the air's temperature and moisture content change. Yet several witnesses felt that the scene was distinct from typical weather due to its suddenness, causing people to stop and think more deeply about the state of our world. As tension keeps spreading, and the major global powers find themselves right in the middle of the mess, the whole world feels like it is stepping into a new kind of pressure, where conflicts are emerging in several areas, and former allies are changing sides as the power balance which appeared stable now seems unstable. Leaders and military strategists are closely observing as rivalries intensify, and new agreements begin to take shape behind closed doors from Eastern Europe to the Middle East, as history demonstrates that periods like these typically portend significant transformations, and some individuals follow prophecy, citing characters who warned about a moment when global anarchy would grow, and the current world order would start to shift into something unrecognizable. However, many people continue to feel that the globe is about to enter some really uncharted area, which has also been discussed by contemporary community leaders, who have frequently stated that humanity may be about to face a severe test during a moment when maintaining spiritual grounding, unity, and faith are crucial. Uncertain times are like a wake-up call that encourages individuals to strengthen their morals, unite, and discover their true beliefs. While the primary Western influence continues to play a significant role on the international scene through economic might and military ties. Whenever tensions begin to rise, analysts worldwide turn to the administrative capital to see what might happen next, because that region continues to play a major role in many of the world's future developments. For many, the ancient warnings, particularly the part against wars and rumors of war, come to mind while discussing the escalating crisis, though these phrases were intended not to frighten, but to remind us that instability has always been part of the human story, and the true message is remaining vigilant and clinging to optimism. Are the conflicts of today merely another difficult period in history, or are we witnessing the beginning of a more profound change in the world order that may influence the coming decades, while nature itself acts a little strangely, and the timing makes people pause? While strange natural occurrences continue to capture interest, another enigma originates from the past, where discoveries in the American heartland, featuring religious symbols and inscriptions resembling ancient Middle Eastern characters, have caused debate for decades. If these signs are authentic, it would imply that cultures from far across the sea may have arrived in the West much before the explorers typically discussed in history books, which is a wild interpretation that connects the oldest books of the ancestral scripts to the history of this land. As tensions rise and alliances change in the cradle of civilization, some observers view findings such as these as reminders that ancient lineages have long been intertwined with the global narrative, rather than merely being random relics. In this era, when bizarre natural occurrences, worldwide strife, and ancient discoveries all seem to be appearing at once, is everything only coincidental, or are prophecy and history intersecting in ways we are just now starting to notice? Many are asking if the return of the great teacher is imminent, and why this is important as one cycle comes to an end and a new one starts. Some have proposed specific years for this return, but none have been accurate, and it seems difficult to celebrate the conclusion of a year without taking this important subject into consideration. The answer might be soon, but we can't be certain, because the teacher himself stated that no one knows the day or time of his return except for the higher source, and he really cautioned against following anyone who claimed to know the exact moment. The return was promised by the higher power, and those promises are always fulfilled, so we must be aware of our surroundings, because nothing remains to prevent this second coming which the great ambassadors refer to as the dawn. Daylight is approaching, and the night is almost over, so we must be a living example of those higher virtues by putting on the armor of light and putting aside the works of darkness. We are to reject our own lower nature and adopt the traits of godliness, as we develop in grace and understanding, never wavering in our devotion, while we strive to live a life that honors those principles. It is a scientific fact that groups of people who share a common sense of purpose and high moral standards are significantly more resilient to the psychological trauma of natural disasters than those who are socially isolated. We must strive to stay steadfast every day and exercise the practices of anticipatory prayer and observation, as we watch for the return, gladly serving dutifully while we wait. As we await this arrival, we find that the inner spirit gives us the ability to bear testimony to these truths, acting as ambassadors, asking everyone to find peace and reconciliation. Because there is a small door leading to eternity that is opening wider with every passing day. Looking toward the future, do you believe that the convergence of these environmental and political signs is a call for a personal spiritual awakening? Or is it just a random coincidence of a chaotic world? The path forward requires us to move with clarity and hope, as the current world order transitions into a new chapter of human history. We unite our collective intent and focus our hearts toward the infinite source of all life and the supreme protective energy that governs the vast reaches of the cosmos, to request a shield of absolute safety and peace for every soul navigating these turbulent times. Because in an era where the foundations of our world seem to be shifting, and the very elements of nature appear to be in a state of rapid transition, we call upon the higher power to envelop every home, every family, and every individual in a mantle of light that no shadow or external chaos can penetrate. May the great teacher's wisdom guide our steps through the gray mists of uncertainty, and may the strength of the ancestral spirit fortify our resolve, so that even when the earth trembles or the skies roar with the sound of 1,000 thunders, we remain unmoved and centered in an unshakable peace that surpasses all human understanding and logic. We ask for the protection of those in the busy metropolitan centers, where the noise of progress often drowns out the quiet voice of the spirit. And we ask for those in the quiet remote settlements alike, that they may find sanctuary from the storms and the rising tensions of the world. And we pray that our leaders are granted a vision of unity and reconciliation to steer humanity away from the brink of conflict and toward a new chapter of collective healing and spiritual awakening. It is a documented scientific fact in the field of quantum biology and heart-brain coherence that human intention and coherent emotional states can influence the subtle electromagnetic fields around us, suggesting that a group of people focused on safety and peace can literally create a more stable and calming environment for those in their immediate vicinity through a phenomenon known as the field effect of consciousness. As we hold this vision of global protection, we ask that the natural systems of the planet, including the deep volcanic calderas, the vast river networks, and the shifting tectonic plates, return to a state of calm and balance, ensuring that the beauty of the world remains a safe harbor for the generations to come who deserve to inherit a world of stability rather than one of constant upheaval. We recognize that the impending changes are but a birth pang of a new era, and we refuse to be rattled or agitated by the rumors of turmoil or the darkening of the skies, because we know that the source of all life is in complete control of the final outcome, and has promised that the dawn will always follow the longest night for those who remain vigilant and hopeful. May our hearts stay full of joy even in the face of the unknown, and may our hope be an anchor for others who feel lost in the darkness of this age of transformation, where the old world is fading, and a new reality is slowly coming into focus for those with the eyes to see it. This leads to a vital question for every viewer watching this today. Do you believe that by strengthening our internal spiritual armor, we can effectively neutralize the fear that the world tries to impose upon us through its chaos? Or are we destined to be shaped and molded by the external events around us? Looking into the future, the true resilience of our civilization will be measured not by our technological might or our economic power, but by our ability to remain compassionate, brave, and united when the old structures begin to crumble. And we must prepare ourselves today by putting on the armor of light and walking with the confidence of those who know they are never truly alone in the dark. We extend this prayer to the weary, the frightened, and the vulnerable, asking that they be granted a profound sense of serenity that settles deep within their bones, and that their physical and emotional needs be met through the unexpected kindness of strangers and the direct intervention of the higher source. Let this moment be our collective wake-up call to strengthen our morals, to unite as a single human family across all borders, and to discover the true beliefs that will carry us through the small door, leading to a brighter and more peaceful eternity where war and suffering are but distant memories of a primitive past. We ask for a shield over the children and the elderly, that their innocence and wisdom may be preserved in the midst of the noise. And we pray that every breath we take becomes an affirmation of life and a rejection of the darkness that tries to take root in our hearts during times of high tension. The atmosphere itself is heavy with the weight of change, and as the air cools and the wind begins to whisper through the trees, we stand firm like ancient oaks, rooted in the truth that we were made for this moment, and we were chosen to witness this great transition with courage and grace. Every person listening to these words is a vital part of this protective network, and as your heart beats in sync with the rhythm of the universe, know that you are a beacon of hope for someone who is currently struggling to find their way. We reject the spirit of panic, and we embrace the spirit of power and of a sound mind, realizing that our thoughts are the architects of our future and our words are the seeds of our reality. May the peace that flows from the higher source wash over your household today, and may your walls be a barrier against any negativity or harm that seeks to enter your sanctuary as we move forward into this unknown year with our heads held high and our spirits burning with a fire that no flood can quench. We speak life over the dying places, and we speak peace over the raging waters, knowing that the same power that stilled the storms of old is still at work in our lives today through the invisible threads of faith and connection. I appreciate you watching and joining us in this moment of deep and necessary reflection, so please remember to subscribe and stay tuned for our upcoming content as we continue to explore these truths together. And be sure to share your own prayers and thoughts in the comments below, because your perspective and your voice are the very things that build this community of hope and light in a world that so desperately needs it. We stand together as ambassadors of a higher kingdom, and as we close this prayer, we do not close our hearts, but rather open them wider to the possibilities of a world transformed by love and protected by the infinite source of all that is good and true. May you walk in safety, and may you rest in hope until we meet again in our next exploration of the wonders and warnings of our time. May the higher source keep you, and may the presence of peace remain within your house forevermore as we face the coming days with a spirit of endurance and a heart filled with gratitude for the protection that surrounds us all. Let the light from above illuminate the path through the mountains and through the valleys, so that no foot shall slip and no heart shall fail in the pursuit of truth. We call for the calming of the storms both within and without, asking that the turbulence of the world be matched by an even greater stillness in our own minds, as we become the anchors for those who are being tossed about by the waves of uncertainty. May every city be a refuge and every street be a path of safety, As the protective mantle of the higher power spreads across the entire map, covering every soul regardless of where they stand or what they have faced in the past. We ask for the strength to forgive and the courage to build bridges in a time when many are seeking to build walls. And we pray that the collective spirit of humanity rises above the petty divisions of the flesh to embrace the eternal reality of our connection to the source. Let this prayer be a shield that travels with you throughout your day, and a blanket that comforts you throughout your night, ensuring that you wake with renewed strength and a clear mind to face whatever the horizon brings. We acknowledge that we are living in a pivotal chapter of human history, and we accept the responsibility to be the carriers of light in a time of great shadows, knowing that our protection is guaranteed by the laws of the universe and the love of the Creator. Walk in peace and walk in power, for you are protected by a force that is greater than any storm and more permanent than any earthquake, as we move together toward the dawn of a new and glorious age. May every city be a refuge and every street be a path of safety, as the protective mantle of the higher power spreads across the entire map, covering every soul regardless of where they stand or what they have faced in the past. We ask for the strength to forgive and the courage to build bridges in a time when many are seeking to build walls. And we pray that the collective spirit of humanity rises above the petty divisions of the flesh to embrace the eternal reality of our connection to the source. Let this prayer be a shield that travels with you throughout your day, and a blanket that comforts you throughout your night, ensuring that you may the inner light of every individual become a powerful lighthouse that cuts through the thickest fog of confusion, and may the strength of the higher power be a physical shield against the rising heat and the sudden floods that have begun to characterize our current era as we move deeper into this cycle of planetary renewal. We specifically request a high level of vigilance and mental clarity for the parents who are guiding their children through these uncertain times. And we ask that the elderly be comforted by a deep sense of ancestral protection that reminds them they have seen many storms, and that this too shall pass under the watchful eye of the Supreme Creator. It is a scientific reality that the human heart generates the largest electromagnetic field in the body. And when we align our hearts in this collective prayer of protection, we are literally creating a coherent wave of energy that can harmonize chaotic environments and provide a buffer against the stress of the impending changes, which is a crucial fact for everyone to remember as they navigate the loud noises of the digital and physical worlds. We speak peace over the volatile regions of the globe where the balance of power is currently tipping, and we ask that the hearts of those in command be softened by a sudden realization of our shared humanity, so that they choose the path of preservation over the path of destruction. And we pray that the resources of the earth be protected from greed and mismanagement, as the ground itself begins to react to the internal pressures of the deep volcanic systems. May the water we drink be purified by the higher intention, and may the land we walk upon be stabilized by the presence of the eternal source, so that no matter where we find ourselves on the map, we are always standing on holy and protected ground that is off limits to the forces of darkness and despair. We look toward the horizon, and we do not see an ending, but rather a magnificent beginning where the resilience of the human spirit is finally fully realized. And we ask for the endurance to remain joyful and active in our service to others, even when the headlines suggest we should be afraid. This moment in history is a call to rise above the fleshly impulses of panic and to embrace the godliness that resides within each of us as we develop in the grace and understanding of the laws that govern the universe, and the protection that is promised to those who remain dedicated to the truth. Let every word of this prayer be a brick in the wall of your safety, and every second of your focus be a bolt in the door of your sanctuary, as we move together as ambassadors of peace in a world that is currently being reshaped by the hands of time and the will of the source. We stand in the gap for those who cannot pray for themselves, And we offer our collective strength to the weary so that the entire human network is lifted up and shielded from the arrows of misfortune and the traps of the adversary. Looking forward, we see a future where the harmony between the earth and its inhabitants is restored. And we prepare for that reality today by walking in the armor of light and refusing to give power to the shadows that flicker on the walls of our current reality. May your rest be deep and your waking moments be filled with a clear sense of purpose as you realize that you are a vital part of this great protective web, and that your presence on this planet at this specific time is not an accident but a divine appointment. We seal this intention with a profound sense of gratitude for the life we have been given and the protection that has already been dispatched to our doorsteps. And we remain watchful and ready for the dawn of the new age that is even now breaking over the hills of our world. We ask for a special covering over the providers and the healers who are on the front lines of the environmental and social shifts. And we pray that their energy remains inexhaustible and their spirits remain bright as they become the hands and feet of the higher source in a time of great need. May the stillness of the deep woods and the vastness of the silent oceans be a reflection of the peace that now resides in your heart, and may you never forget that the power within you is infinitely greater than any pressure coming from the world outside. We are the children of the light and the heirs of a peaceful eternity, and we claim our inheritance of safety and joy right now in the midst of the storm, as we continue to watch and pray with the expectation of a glorious outcome that has been written since the beginning of time. Do you feel the strength of this collective shield as it grows with every soul that joins us in this intent? Or do you believe that we must find our own way through the darkness alone? The answer lies in our unity and our shared devotion to the source of all that is good and true, so let us walk forward with heads held high and hearts full of the fire that no flood can extinguish, as we embrace the protection that is our birthright. We are the children of the light and the heirs of a peaceful eternity, and we claim our inheritance of safety and joy right now in the midst of the storm, as we continue to watch and pray with the expectation of a glorious outcome that has been written since the beginning of time. Do you feel the strength of this collective shield as it grows with every soul that joins us in this intent? Or do you believe that we must find our own way through the darkness alone? The answer lies in our unity and our shared devotion to the source of all that is good and true, so let us walk forward with heads held high and hearts full